Hello, everyone. I hope you enjoyed this demonstration of Gmail. My name is ZON. I'm one of the founding team members at Initia. Today, I'm going to tell you a little bit about Initia, which is a network for interwoven rollups. And this is a presentation I put together on the airplane on the way here, so please keep that in mind. Thanks. Cool. So a little bit about me. I'm Canadian. I went to Penn. I studied computer science and business, did my master's in CS. And then during COVID, I got pretty into DeFi through just gambling on chain, as most people do, farming the yams and the shitcoins and the such. I got pretty interested in building in crypto through an app chain approach. I fell in love with the Cosmos ecosystem and thought it was really interesting that you could build unique applications that have ability to control everything about themselves. And so I joined as a smart contract developer within the Cosmos ecosystem, and that's kind of where my journey began. A few years later, after that, I helped found Initia with a group of pretty awesome people. But let me give you a quick rundown of some of the history of app chains before we get into what Initia is now. So we started off with Ethereum, of course, one of the best and biggest monolithic chains. And then we had Cosmos. So Cosmos was the first framework to build application-specific blockchains. The Cosmos SDK was incredible in the sense that you could change everything about how the chain actually operates. And so we saw this Cambrian explosion of the Cosmos ecosystem. We had tens of different blockchains, starting to be now over 100 different blockchains within Cosmos, all connected with a shared thread of underlying infrastructure, which is IBC in the Cosmos SDK. After this, we realized that we quickly wanted more scale within the Ethereum landscape in the EVM world. So we started to develop these things called rollups. The thing about Ethereum, though, was that it was never really developed for rollups. The original goal of scaling was through sharding. And so we started to get these various different types of rollup systems. We had the OP stack, Arbitrum Orbit, things like Metis, ZK Sync, but we still wanted more scale. And so people decided to build different types of monolithic blockchains that changed the ways they were built, whether that be their consensus mechanisms, their virtual machines like Move. We got systems like Solana, Aptos, Sei, Avalanche. But fundamentally, what happened is these systems were fragmented. We have basically these isolated worlds that don't play very nice with each other. There are these borders that are hard to control, and we slapped some tape over them and said, we're going to build interoperability solutions. Things like Layer 0 and Hyperlane. We thought these would be the fix that we can use to amend the system that we already had in place. Then we started to get this thing called modularity. So we're taking already this fragmented system and these monolithic blockchains, and we're splitting them up even further. So we're splitting a chain into its many different stacks, whether that be its execution layer, the settlement layer, the data availability layer, and it's kind of like a burger now. You can pick your favorite parts of each one of these systems. But unfortunately, this leads to even more fragmentation within the world from both a user's perspective, but also as a developer. So this is what you currently have on Solana, where you basically have like 15 different USDCs, which is insane because it's the same one token. And if I, as a crypto builder that's been in the space for over 3 years, can't figure out which USDC is the USDC I should be using, how can we ever expect an end user who's coming into crypto for the first time to understand how to use 1,000 different rollups with 1,000 different application-specific blockchains? So we essentially realized that multi-chain systems are garbage in their current state, but app chains are the future. We've seen time and time again, people want to build app chains, whether that be Cosmos systems or systems within rollups on Ethereum, but the way that they're built right now just doesn't work. And so this is going to be the world when Initia launches. And so let's explore some of the problems that we encounter more specifically within the current systems that we do have in place. So let's first take a look at Cosmos. It is the most powerful stack to build unique blockchains. That's why you have teams like Hyperliquid, Berachain, DYDX v4, Osmosis, et cetera, that build with this framework. And there's a system for native interoperability. However, it does have its downsides, primarily this being every Cosmos chain is an L1. That means you have to manage a robust set of validators to pay for security, and most often you have to inflate your token supply to people that are your biggest sellers. Tends to be quite costly, and many Cosmos chains right now, in fact, lose money every single day because they pay out more in inflation that needs to be dumped to offset the cost of validator infrastructure. Secondly, there's too many cooks in the kitchen. Basically, everyone within the Cosmos landscape wanted to become the main hub. This led to fragmentation not only within the tokens that exist within the ecosystem, but also the developers that understand which product areas they control, as well as just governance systems. For the longest time, the Cosmos Hub, which is the main chain in Cosmos, has not had smart contracts. There's been over 3 attempts to add smart contracts to that chain, and as of 2 days ago, it finally passed after something like 4 years, which is incredible, but you can see the amount of gridlock that occurs within these systems. And then within IBC, which is supposed to be this one amazing solution for interoperability, it does present its own problems. So let's look at some of those. So in Cosmos land, there's this idea of pairwise dependencies for IBC. This means that basically, between every 2 chains, you set up an IBC relay so that you can send tokens between them. So when you send an Ethereum token, for example, from chain 1 to chain 2 to chain 3, versus if you send that token directly from chain 1 to chain 3 itself, you get 2 different tokens on chain 3, which is insane. That fragmentation should not be a problem that users have to deal with when you have this web of infrastructure that's supposed to deal with all things composability. The ideal approach that Cosmos Hub was originally supposed to do was be built like this, where all IBC transfers are routed through the Cosmos layer 1, called Atom. And in that sense, if you're sending from something like Osmosis to Stride, you would do 2 IBC transactions, 1 to the hub and 1 back to Stride. And this ensures that you never have this pairwise dependency problem and you don't create liquidity fragmentation. Unfortunately, what happened was that there was too many cooks in the kitchen and everyone wanted to be the hub themselves. So from Cosmos Hub, Osmosis tried to do the same thing, and we basically went down this rabbit hole for years of fragmentation within Cosmos. So now let's look at the scaling solutions on Ethereum. This is typically optimistic rollups like the OP Stack and Arbitrum Orbit. The advantages are that they're very easy to launch because as rollups, you don't have to deal with inflation, you don't have to deal with validator sets. You can just click a button and deploy a chain. The problem with that is they're just fundamentally inflexible. You can't change a single thing about the chain itself aside from the gas token that's used. So you're essentially copying and pasting the same chain over and over again for all of these OP Stack deployments. And so you do not get the fundamental flexibility that you do have when you use Cosmos SDK. You're confined to the ways that the EVM operates, and you're basically isolated and fragmented. Without solutions like Layer 0 or Hyperlane, you can't provide instant bridging for your users. There's no way to get great access to oracles on these Layer 2s. And then you're never going to get access to things like native USDC or CCTP unless you're a massive Layer 2 like Optimism or Arbitrum itself. For folks that want app chains, this is basically a dream that probably will never happen. And so how do we fix this? Ooh. Okay, well, the solutions should be fully customizable using pieces of the Cosmos SDK. We should be able to change app chains as flexibly as you can right now within Cosmos land, not like you can in Ethereum. They should have access to good security. That means you shouldn't need to run things like validator sets, but using a system like rollups, you can spin up these flexible app chains easily while still guaranteeing security through the underlying base chain. And then they should be interoperable from day one. Interoperability should not be an afterthought that you plug into a system to patch these holes. And so that's where Initia comes into play. So Initia is a network for interwoven rollups. We are holistically rebuilding multi-chain networks from the ground up on 3 main verticals: within the product stack, the architecture stack, and the economic systems that tie it all together. We essentially said, you know what? Let's just rebuild the whole goddamn thing without so many cooks in the kitchen. We have the belief that essentially app chains should follow a similar framework to Apple and the iOS design. Currently, what exists is a lot more like Android. You have these systems that are somewhat similar, and then you have various different interoperability things that you can plug in like Android or Google SDKs. But we think that these solutions should be a lot more like Apple's design philosophy, where you have these various applications. Nobody particularly cares about how they're run underneath. And for a user's perspective, there's very similar frameworks that are used when interacting with them all. This is why we think the product stack on top of the architecture system is something that we really need to work on as well. So when you're paying in an in-app payment, despite using different apps within your iPhone, you have the same Face ID modal. When you're signing in, it's always also the same. We want to create that across thousands of different roll-ups in the future. So this is the Initia architecture that we have right now. This represents Omnitia. It is the system of the Initia layer 1, as well as every layer 2 that exists on top of Initia. And so Omnitia, how it works is we essentially have an Initia layer 1, which is a Cosmos SDK-based chain that is running MoveVM. And then we built the OP init stack. That's an optimistic rollup framework that's built directly in the Cosmos SDK, and it is VM agnostic. That means you don't have to use the EVM. On top of Initia, your rollups can change everything about the rollup itself on the Cosmos SDK side, but then we've also integrated EVM, MoveVM, and WASM-VM. So you can pick your favorite smart contracting environment that works best for you and your application, change everything about the rollup itself, and then build the most powerful blockchain stack possible. So Minitias are our layer 2 systems. Like I said, you can pick and choose whatever VM you like best. We've put a lot of care into developing these VMs from the ground up on top of Cosmos to ensure that there's a seamless layer between the Cosmos side and the VM side. And so the MoveVM and the EVM are all new, built by the Initia team, and the WASM VM is something that's existed within Cosmos land for a while. So when you build a Initia layer 2, despite being able to choose and change things from the Cosmos SDK side or the smart contracting layer, we use our layer 1 to provide a lot of value back to these layer 2s to ensure that they're not met with the same problems that you have within the Ethereum rollup framework. And so the advantage is that we've been able to reapproach this problem by seeing these systems over time. We're holistically rebuilding multi-chain networks by attaching a layer 1 with a layer 2 and building those together in tandem to ensure that these layer 2s come with everything that they need. So when you launch a layer 2, from day 1, you have access to oracles that are atomically fetchable from every layer 2, which is incredibly advantageous. You have fiat on-ramps that you can use. You have bridging and instant bridging through a large omni-chain bridge provider that I'm not allowed to reveal yet. You have interoperability and fungibility of tokens across every single one of these layer 2s, despite being in different VMs. You have native USDC and CCTP access, which is something you would never get on the OP stack. You have the ability to change your gas tokens, and you can change everything about the chain itself on the Cosmos SDK side. Essentially, this is the most product-ready and flexible rollup stack that exists to date. Then we built something called enshrined liquidity. So enshrined liquidity, what we did was essentially we altered Cosmos' staking modules, and we allowed you to stake various LP tokens directly with validators on our layer 1. So you can stake things like Init USDC, Init ETH, Init Tia, and what this does is it creates a moat of liquidity that is very accessible for every layer 2. It also provides enhanced staking yields. And lastly, it creates an inter-Initia router. So if you remember what I was talking about earlier with the Cosmos IBC pairwise dependency problem, you have a system where you have all this fragmentation because there's no central hub. But what we've done is with all of these rollups, they're all attached to our layer 1 via one IBC relay. And so as those tokens are moving through the layer 1 from one rollup to another, the liquidity that we've created within the layer 1 through enshrined liquidity can be used to facilitate all sorts of swaps. So you can send USDC from one rollup and receive ETH on another rollup, and you will not have had to do any sort of multiple different transfers. So this is pretty cool. There's a lot of other things that are awesome within the Initia framework, but I think I need to step off soon. But one of the things that we did do really well is focus on the product stack around this. So we rebuilt how it looks and feels like to actually use multi-chain networks, not only built the architecture stack that people use to build blockchains. So that means we've rebuilt essentially the wallet experience, enabling all of these chains to connect to any EVM wallet, Cosmos wallets, in-app wallets. We've built the Initia app, which is kind of the home ground for all things to do on the layer 1. We've built Initia usernames, which is essentially a multi-chain wide username system like ENS's, but they span across every single layer 2 within the Initia world. And then we've rebuilt an economic framework around this that basically ties the entire system together. So at Initia, we've fundamentally rebuilt how multi-chain networks should look, feel, and operate for both developers and users along the product stack, the architecture stack, and then the economic systems as well. We'll be launching public testnet at the end of this month with a suite of layer 2 teams. Pretty excited for you all to check out everything that we've built, as well as some of these product teams that have been building layer 2s for the past 4 months. Thank you.